The Golden State Warriors' start to the season was one that wasn't expected. As the defending world champions, they were expected to compete once again. And more interestingly, they were expected to integrate the young players they acquired in the draft to get them ready to be the future of the franchise, while also still trying to compete for titles with the all-time great point guard who was still in his prime being the centerpiece of the team. However, the young players on Golden State outside of Jordan Poole really haven't gotten consistent minutes, and there are two that I want to talk about today, Jonathan Kuminga and James Wiseman. Now you might be wondering why I'm focusing on these two and not some of the other young players on the roster like Moody and Baldwin Jr. Well, Baldwin Jr. is a rookie that has been dealing with multiple injuries for a while now, like dating back to high school he's been dealing with injuries, and he's spending a lot of time in the G League, which is to be expected. Baldwin was a lottery-type talent, he was a top 5 recruit in the country, he was viewed as a potential first overall pick going into his freshman season, but a combination of injuries and underperforming in a situation he was expected to dominate at UW-Milwaukee led to him falling to the 28th pick. Again, given the injuries and his draft slot, I really can't judge him considering he's clearly not going to play a lot, and it wasn't expected that he would play a lot. Now with Moody, it's more interesting. He's gotten the most minutes of the career young players minus Poole at 16.9 minutes per game. However, he has picked up DNPs over his last 2 games. But regardless, it makes more sense that he would get the most minutes of the young guys on the roster that aren't named Jordan Poole. He's a spot-up shooter, and he's active on defense, although far from perfect on that end of the floor. That's not to say that Moody doesn't have potential outside of that, but he does have a defined skill set that the other guys just don't have. And because of the fact he does have that defined skill set, it's easier to not play him through mistakes compared to the other young guys, because it won't hinder his ability when called upon as much. Moody isn't a finished product. I think he has a higher ceiling than most people believe he does. He has potential as a pull-up shooter and shot creator as well. But you can throw Moody into a game for about 15 to 17 minutes as an off-ball mover and spot-up shooter. He's very capable of doing that. However, for the other two, it's just not the case. I want to start with Jonathan Kuminga. Kuminga has a lot of potential as a forward in my opinion. I think you could argue he has the most upside of any player on that Warriors roster among the young guys, not counting guys like Steph obviously. However, the reason he hasn't gotten a lot of minutes is because he's still very raw. His feel for the game still isn't great. And when you have a young talent that's really raw, it's important that he's allowed to play through his mistakes in order to develop. The problem is that allowing a young player to play through mistakes and trying to compete for titles don't go hand in hand. I know people try to compare Kuminga to a player like Jaylen Brown, as these raw athletes with a lot of potential. And while yes, there were similarities in the situations they had as rookies, in fact, Kuminga's rookie numbers are actually better than Jaylen's, the difference is that they play different positions. Jaylen's a wing that plays the 2 and the 3, Kuminga is a forward that plays the 3 and primarily the 4, and on top of that, it's unfair to expect Kuminga to progress the way Jaylen has in his career because Jaylen has some of the most outlier development progression I've ever seen. Also, the idea of Kuminga having a similar development curve as Jaylen hinged on the idea that he would quickly develop into one of the better 3-point shooters like Jaylen has, and it's hard to believe that Kuminga will do that. Jaylen developed in a way that made Boston feel comfortable enough to start him and play him 30 plus minutes per game in his second season. A lot of that has to do with Jaylen developing a game that fits within the flow of the offense. Kuminga is not quite as far along in his development as Jaylen was in year 2. And it's not all a bad thing either, because Jaylen was a year older than Kuminga was when he entered the league. On top of that, Jaylen also had much more normal circumstances around the league when he entered the league compared to the circumstances around the world when Kuminga entered the league, to say the least. However, regardless, betting on an outlier development curve is still too much to ask of any young player. Kuminga still has a lot of potential, and I do believe it's way too early to give up on him. However, I do think the best case scenario is him to be traded for a player that can contribute and him going to a young team where he will get the opportunity to play through his mistakes. I don't think that the situation where he can play through his mistakes is in Golden State right now, and I think a situation where he's traded to a young team for maybe somebody in return that doesn't fit the timeline of the team that he's being traded to, but still is a good player, I think that could work out for both sides. Now, Wiseman's situation is similar to Kuminga's in certain ways. Both of them are players that I feel do need to play through mistakes in order to develop. Both clearly are a bit away from being ready to contribute, and the Warriors aren't a team where they can consistently get the development they need at the NBA level. Maybe it's through G League, but I do think that the Warriors were hoping that these two were ready to contribute right away this year, and that clearly hasn't been the case. Now, the difference is that the idea of Wiseman is a bit more set in stone than it is with Kuminga. Wiseman is a player that I have a better understanding of what his role is supposed to be. A drop big that can catch lobs and dump offs and defend the paint and just use his massive frame to affect opposing offenses, which he has done at times. Now, the problem with Wiseman is his development is in a weird spot, to say the least. He had one of the most unfortunate turn of events for a prospect drafted as high as he was I've ever seen. He barely played in college because of a scandal that should have never been a scandal because he really didn't do anything wrong. The NCAA is just corrupt. He's dealing with injuries. He dealt with a big one halfway through his rookie year, missed all of his second season because of the injury, and has barely played because of that, and it's led to his development being stalled. He's only played in 55 basketball games in 3 years. That's only 18 games per year, which isn't ideal for the development of an NBA player. I feel bad for Wiseman because a lot of the things about his development stalling aren't in his control. The injuries aren't within his control. The college situation was about more than what was within his control as a young adult. Wiseman is a player that needs on-court game speed reps more than anyone. He needs the experience because of the lack of game speed reps he got over the past 3 years, and I don't know if Golden State is going to be a place where that can happen. I know some of you guys think I hate the Warriors young core based off the way I've talked about them in videos over the past few years, but that's not true. I think Kuminga has a ton of potential. I'm rooting for James Wiseman to succeed, but based off what I've seen, it just isn't working the way the Warriors want it to work. I understand the idea of a 2 timelines rebuild if the stars are getting older and are clearly starting to decline. But Steph isn't declining. He's still one of the 5, arguably 3 best players in the world. I think it's important to focus on winning when you have a Steph caliber player on the roster that clearly can still be the best player on a team that wins it all. I think trading Wiseman and Kuminga will be beneficial to both the Warriors and, more importantly, the development of those 2 particular players. Being around winning basketball helps out a lot. I'm not going to deny that. I do think being on a championship team was important for Kuminga and Wiseman to see how it's done. But at the same time, you do need on-court reps to develop eventually, and that's not happening right now. Maybe they go to the G League, maybe they don't to get those minutes. But they aren't going to develop by only getting garbage time minutes and picking up DMPs. That's not how you develop players. They were expected to be contributors off the bench going into the season, and that's just not the case. Maybe they do figure it out and become contributors this season and prove everything I've said in this video wrong. I would love for that to be the case. But the Warriors do need to do something about this if that's not the case. And I hate to break it to you, but it doesn't look like the case where they just magically figure it out is one that's very likely. But I would love to hear what you have to say in the comment section below. Do you think the Warriors should keep Kuminga and keep Wiseman and just help them develop and hope that they can reach their full potential? Do you think they should trade them for players that can help contribute to a contender right away? What do you think? Do you think they should even move on from Moody, keep Moody, or the other young players that I really didn't focus too much on? I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think the Warriors need to do in order to get back to the contention that we all know they can? Do you think that this is just a slow start and they figure it out eventually, or do you think this is an actual worrying sign? I'd love to hear all of that in the comment section below. But that being said, have a nice day, and I'll see you guys in the next one.